Hello, my name is Rebecca Chung, and I'm the Executive Director of Leadership Programs at the Graduate School of Education at UC Berkeley, and also the Director of 21 CSLA State Center. Welcome to our webinar. 21 CSLA State Center is headquartered at UC Berkeley. Before we begin this virtual meeting, we acknowledge that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other Verona Band descendants. Every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today. In recognition of this, Berkeley School of Education faculty contribute to the Shumi Land Tax, a voluntary financial contribution that non-Indigenous people living on the traditional Chochenyo and Ohlone territory make to support the critical work of the Sogorea Teo Land Trust. If you too have benefited or continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this land, we encourage you to do the same. If you do not live in Berkeley, we encourage you to visit Native Land, California, to learn more about the land you occupy and find meaningful ways to support the Indigenous stewards of that land. And now we will begin our Research Practice Webinar 7, Leadership Lessons from Early Transitional Kindergarten Implementers in California. 21 CSLA is dedicated to the professional learning and support of California's educational leaders, teachers, site, and district leaders to create more equitable learning environments that ultimately improve success for underserved students. It is led in partnership with UCLA School of Education, the California Subject Matter Projects, and 7 regional academies across the state. Today's webinar is sponsored by the generous contributions of the Heising Simons Foundation, the Silver Giving Foundation, and the Center for District Innovation and Leadership in Early Education, otherwise known as DIAL-EE, and we acknowledge them for their contributions to this webinar. Finally, we also acknowledge the California Department of Education, the California State Board of Education, and the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence for their support of 21 CSLA. In today's webinar, we will set the stage for the broad policies in California around universal pre-kindergarten, and then we will have a moderated panel discussion with 3 members who are are leaders in early implementation districts. Then we will take questions from the audience, and you will be encouraged to submit your questions to me via the chat. I will review the questions and share a few of them with the panelists for their responses. Then we'll close with summary comments and a few announcements. We're really looking forward to learning from these leaders together. 21 CSLA is organized around issues of equity leadership, and our work is guided by an equity statement, which reads that leaders for equity transform education to improve access, opportunity, and inclusion for students and adults, especially those who are systematically marginalized and historically underserved so that they can thrive. Certainly, issues in pre-kindergarten and transitional kindergarten are addressed and included in this equity statement. In addition to this webinar this spring, 21 CSLA will organize in a community of practice that will support leaders across the state who are discussing these issues in their local context. But first, a word about the pre-kindergarten initiative. As we're all aware, California is embarking on an ambitious policy that by 2025 will realize universal pre-kindergarten through a combination of approaches and services.
Hey.
UPK consists of universal transitional kindergarten, as well as other programs and services that families can choose from to meet their needs and simultaneously ensure rich early learning opportunities for all 3 and 4-year-old children during the year or two prior to kindergarten. To embark and support on this pre-kindergarten initiative, 21 CSLA will provide support by building the capacity of equity-centered instructional leadership at the teacher, site, and district levels with a focus on the pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade continuum. After this webinar, all registrants and also your colleagues are invited to participate in a 12-hour community of practice with role-alike leaders that will occur starting in April. The goal of this community of practice is to focus on issues related to leading for equity through instruction as we implement the UPK policy. Participation in this community of practice is at no cost to leaders who work in Title II receiving LEAs, and this is a great opportunity, an early opportunity to network with UTK leaders across California. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar would not be possible without the sponsorship and support of Dial EE. It is my great pleasure to introduce Tara Ryan, who is Dial EE's Deputy Director. Tara has been working in the field of education for over 20 years, including teaching, coaching, and administration. In previous roles, Tara served as the director of the San Francisco Unified School District Early Education Department, director of the San Diego County Office of Education Early Education Department, and senior director of the I3 Institute. She holds a master's degree in education with emphasis in social justice and equity, as well as a multiple subject teaching credential and administrative services credential. Tara's work has focused on P3 alignment, systems development, professional development, and leadership development within educational systems. It is our great pleasure to invite Tara to moderate today's panel. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm so pleased to be here today on behalf of Dial E and in partnership with 21 CSLA. Today's focus, as Rebecca shared, is on leadership and planning for UTK implementation. In a minute, you'll hear from district leaders who have been actively engaged in early learning within their districts, who serve as experts and advocates within their districts, and also have established community partnerships. In addition to TK, these leaders oversee state-funded preschool and other early learning programs, such as CSPP, which is state preschool, special education, etc. But for all of us here today, it's important to consider what's noted on the slide in front of us. For many school districts and district leaders, there isn't an existing or established early learning program or clear strategy yet to build on. The conversation and information about UPK, UTK, P3, community partnerships, it can all be overwhelming. A lot of folks are just asking, where do I even start? So we acknowledge that there's a wide variance of experience in early learning across California school districts. There's also a wide variance in experience, resources, and supports for implementing transitional kindergarten. The majority of districts don't have an early learning program, such as state preschool, other than transitional kindergarten currently. And TK has been implemented differently so far from one district to the next. More than 200 California school districts don't have more than just a handful of age-eligible TK students, these really small, often single school districts. So again, there's a huge variance in how districts are approaching planning for and ultimately implementing universal transitional kindergarten before even thinking about what does universal preschool mean, et cetera. What today's session can provide is an opportunity to hear from a panel of early education leaders who will offer some tidbits of their experience, their knowledge, and hopefully shine a light on where you might get started in your own district and in your own work. So that leads me to introducing our panel for today. Our three panelists today are all Dial E Fellows. The Dial E Fellows are early learning leaders in California school districts who participate in a collaborative professional learning experience to enhance their capacity to strengthen public education systems, innovate solutions, and inform policy. The focus of the fellowship is to build distributed leadership within school districts to affect early learning and K-12 systems alignment. Dial-E's fellows have been actively engaged in learning about, informing, and planning for implementation since the UTK legislation was first introduced about a year ago. Our three panelists today will share a little bit about their own experience within their districts and their own perspectives about planning for and implementing UTK. So our first panelist today is Christy Herrera. She's the Executive Director of Early Learning at Oakland Unified School District. Christy started her career as a special ed teacher and has also been a program coordinator and principal within Oakland Unified School District. She was the founding principal of the Burbank Preschool Center and then moved into a leadership role in the early education department. In her role as Executive Director, Christy supports all preschool and TK programs. Her focus is on increasing quality education for all young learners in the district and creating positive and meaningful inclusion opportunities for all students. Welcome, Christy. Our next panelist is Noemi Valdez. She's the Director of Early Childhood Education Programs at Oxnard School District in Ventura County. Noemi started her career in education as a bilingual instructional assistant. Since then, she's worked in both the community and the school district, where her roles have included supporting mental health and early intervention services, preschool program development and partnerships, RTI, and as Director of Early Education, Noemi oversees all early learning programs in her school district. Welcome, Noemi. Our third panelist is Sandra Lee, the preschool program coordinator for Weaver Union School District in Merced County. Sandra's career in early education includes teaching, coaching, and delivering professional development, particularly aligned with California's quality rating and improvement systems. In her role as preschool coordinator at Weaver USD, Sandra works to empower educators and families through training, coaching, and support with a focus on cultural awareness and family and community partnerships. Welcome to each of our panelists today. And we can move on to the first question for our panelists. So we'll ask each of you to respond to this question, to just share a little bit about the context of your district, the history of transitional kindergarten, and how you came to this role. And why don't we start with Christy?
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here. As Tara said, I'm Christy Herrera. I'm the ED of Early Learning. So it's quite a journey in Oakland for TK. We started in 2010 when TK first rolled out. We had 11 full day programs. We just started off right off the bat, no half day TK, we did full day. And we were really working on the quality of the program. We were doing high quality PD with our 11 educators. We had foundation money from the Rainin Foundation to have a 3-hour early literacy tutor in each classroom. And we were really working on implementing and designing a TK program. In 2015, the district wanted to offer TK at every site, which unfortunately caused a lot of combos, which really kind of changed the purpose of TK. So we kind of had to act quickly and think, okay, if we have these combos, we need to think about TK a little differently. So we made some adjustments and eventually had to scale back some of our classrooms because the combo of a TKK was really not what the state intended for transitional kindergarten. So we made a couple mistakes and learned from our educators throughout the process on really how to implement TK. Most of our TK teachers at the time were highly experienced kindergarten teachers between 2010 and 2015. And did a lot of training with our current preschool teachers on the purpose of play and how to really design a program. Fast forward to now, we have 41 TK classrooms. We have early literacy tutors in every classroom, and some of them are full-time, some of them are part-time. And we're working closely with our teachers to adopt a new curriculum and assessment. And kind of how I came to this role, I was a special ed teacher for a while, working in Oakland Unified, and had the privilege of being a principal for several years. And someone asked me, hey, what have you ever thought about moving to early learning central leadership. And I thought, no, 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 I love being a principal. This is my favorite school ever. I don't want to leave. But I felt something pulling at me to really support other schools. So I transitioned to preschool. I was the director of early childhood at the time. And we had some leadership changes, and my superintendent said, hey, what about taking on TK? And I said, okay, I don't know much about it. I am a SPED preschool person, but I will happily learn. And so from 2015 on, I've been supporting our TK programs. In Oakland, we feel really strongly, we call it early learning because we serve all kids birth to 5 in my program. We support special ed, early and special ed TK are with my department. They're not separated out in special ed. We really believe that early learning is a full continuum of birth to 5, as well as housing an early childhood and early learning diagnostic center within our department. And I find that when you have all of our early learning educators together, regardless if they have a multiple subjects credential, a SPED credential, or a permit, they really are talking about the same thing. And that's around developing a high quality program for children birth to 5, developmentally appropriate practices, all of those beautiful things. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Christy. Noemi, would you share, respond to the same question, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tara. And thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about our program here in Oxnard. Oxnard School District is a preschool through 8th grade district in the beautiful city of Oxnard. And just wanted to make sure that we know that our board of trustees, our administrators, teachers, and all of our parents really value early childhood education. And we think it's the foundation to the trajectory towards a successful education career for our students. We value the contributions that early childhood education makes towards school readiness of our youngest learners. Early childhood education is purposefully integrated into our district's educational infrastructure, our funding and investment practices, in order that all students and their families receive the same intent and level of attention and services and have access to all the possibilities as other grades. Early childhood education is expected to align to all of our district approaches, our goals, our objectives, from our mission and vision to our student profile, which are characteristics and traits that we want our students to promote to high school in their pocket and ready to use. And then also our biliteracy, literacy, and mathematical pedagogies. Our district implemented TK since its inception and in the recommended intervals over several years. TK now is a standalone grade with instructional hours that are parallel to kindergarten. We offer TK at various locations throughout our district, and this provides access in all quadrants of the district. Our teachers have all met and meet the TK qualifications specifications. And our support staff, we have a support staff assigned to the classrooms in order to assist during core instructional periods. Transportation is offered when needed. The district adopted an early education curriculum, and our teachers engage in all types of professional development and collaboration practices, including preschool to 3rd grade alignment to support and enhance their instructional practices. And like all LEAs, we are currently reviewing our current practices, exploring all the legislative changes, and engaging in conversations to formulate our implementation plan for a next school year. As you heard, I started my journey fresh out of high school as a bilingual instructional assistant, supporting our kindergarten through 5th grade students. I left the district, returned about 15 years later to provide mental health supports for kindergarten to 3rd grade students that were experiencing mild to moderate adjustment difficulties. Then throughout my career in the district, working my way through positions that included coordinating site-based RTI processes, reaching out to community partners to provide site-based early identification, early intervention, as well as family strengthening services. Then in my current role that I hold now as a director of early learning programs. And so it is my pleasure to be on the team that is going to be rolling out our UTK.
Thank you, Noemi. Sandra, how about you? Share a little bit about the context of your district and how you came into your role.
Hi, everyone. So we are located in Merced, California. It is a rural community that is based around a lot of agriculture, and our district is very small. We have one middle school and then 2 elementary sites. And at each elementary site, I have TK classrooms, so 2 TK sessions, and then we have 5 preschool sessions between the whole district. So we have 3 TK and 5 pre-K sessions. And I only started working for the district about 3 years ago, and mainly just with the preschool department. But as we transitioned into distance learning this last few years, we really just supported the TK teachers in what distance learning should look like for pre-K. It was a crazy time. And so that kind of bridged the gap between TK and pre-K for us a little bit. But even within our district, it is still a work in progress. From site to site, the TKs are very different. We have, all of our programs are 3.5 hours, but one program has 24 TK students at one site, whereas another one has 2 sessions and it's 12 and 13. And then our preschool sessions are CSPP, and they have 24 sessions and different curriculum for pre-K and TK. So as we are having these conversations, all the kids are 4, aligning that, right? 3 to 4, that we start streamlining things in our district a little more, and what are developmentally appropriate practices. And Noemi will go into that as we move on today. But how I came into this role, I had 5 years in the preschool classroom, and then I've been coaching for 13, and I've had 3 years with this district, and it's just been a really fun ride.
Thank you, Sandra. All right, we'll move on to question number 2. So Noemi, could you start, please? How does Universal Transitional Kindergarten provide opportunities to discuss equity issues in your context, in your district?
Thank you, Tara. This new legislation brings an opportunity for our LEAs to really relook at our equity practices in our TK programming and structure. While equity is a very, very broad subject encompassing lots of different areas, I would like to reference at least just one area programming decisions have a great impact on, and that's the effects of instructional practices on student behavior. As you well know, Universal Transitional Kindergarten opens a door to younger children than what school districts have historically served. And these are students and children who have not yet fully developed their brains, their social, emotional, language, cognitive, physical development skills. And we can all agree that we want to provide high quality early learning experiences, and then also implement instructional practices that provide each child with a nurturing environment that fosters their growth, their learning, and their development. One research-based and effective approach to foster growth and learning in very, very young children is developmentally appropriate practices. These are strategies that promote optimal developmental learning. One example is play-based approach to engaging learning. So young children, very, very young children, are motivated to play, naturally motivated to play. And we use play to build on their motivation as a context for learning. This allows students to experiment, to explore new ideas, to think critically, to solve problems on their own or with their peers, and that helps children to build language and social skills. The time that we spent in play, is an instructional strategy. It is not a reward for good behavior, and certainly not a free-for-all. And I can tell you a story about a free-for-all, what that means. But teachers in a play-based approach, teachers intentionally manipulate the classroom environment, the materials, and their teachings, and then they guide the conversation and they guide the leaning toward the learning towards the identified goal for that activity, for the day, for the week, and so on for that unit. Now contrast that with that same 4-year-old who typically at this age is just beginning to develop self-regulation skills, and is asked to sit down for 15 minutes to complete a tabletop activity, such as a pencil and paper activity, a 4-year-old. So for a 4-year-old, 15 minutes is an eternity. Now think of all the behaviors this particular approach can trigger, and how these challenging behaviors can then lead to disciplinary actions, even expulsion if it's a consistent and continuing challenging behavior, and then and at the end, really excluding the students who are most in need of these services. I'm not implying that we don't have behavior challenges in play-based instruction. No, on the contrary. But through play, we take that opportunity to really model attitudes and ways to approach problem-solving skills and desired behaviors and interactions. As LEAs, we typically struggle to fully embracing this practice of play-based learning. These are the high-quality, effective, research-based, and equitable instructional practices that we must consider as we plan for our UTK implementation.
Thank you, Naomi. So much to think about in what you just shared. Sandra, I know you had sort of a different kind of area of equity to talk about.
Yes, but I do want to piggyback on Noemi a little bit, that just to give you guys some context, there's more preschoolers that get expelled and suspended than any other grades from kinder to 12th grade. And so just think about that. And when we think about developmentally appropriate practices, we think about our workforce, right? And so workforce is one of those equity issues that we're addressing as a district also, is who's going to come into these classrooms and teach these TK students. And we're asking a teacher to have a credential and 24 ECE units. And for us in our district, we have preschool teachers with permits where they are eligible to teach preschool, and they have the ECE units, or we have teachers with their multiple subject credential, but they don't have the 24 ECE units. So as a district, how are we providing that support for the teachers to be able to get both? And then also what happens to those teachers that only have the preschool permit, and as enrollment for CSP starts to go down, where do we put those teachers, right? And so there were a few things that our district did. We surveyed our teachers to see who would be interested in getting one or the other to make sure that they could teach TK, because I have to tell you, my teachers that are teaching preschool or TK, they don't do it for the money. Definitely not, right? We're not in education to make a ton of money. They do it because they love this grade level. And so they still want to stick to this grade level, but how do we then make sure that they have everything in line? And so as a district, we've worked really hard with our local county office of ed. They have a lot of my teachers right now are taking these pre-service courses that will make them eligible to be in an intern program if they get hired at the elementary level. And so I've got probably in my small district about 10 teachers that are attempting to take these pre-service courses so that they can get their credential. And as a district, we are paying for those courses, because I can't ask a teacher who's making like an aide who's making like $15 an hour to pay, $1,000 for a course. It just isn't feasible financially. And so we're trying to support them in as many ways as we know how, applying for different grants to be able to get these credentials paid for. And, and as we think about aligning kind of what developmentally appropriate practices looks like, also providing lots of PD for our staff. And so we just had one based on environments this last Saturday, where we bridged the gap between pre-K and TK, because what happened in the past a lot, even with our pre-K program, was that the teachers didn't have support, they didn't have coaching, they didn't know what developmentally appropriate practices were. So it's almost like we had to hit a reset button and just teach them everything from the get-go. And so giving them the opportunities for that PD, being able to provide, extra pay for them to come. It was really nice. We had one last Saturday, and on Monday, you see the wheels turning in all the teachers, and they're so excited. But just, being able to provide those opportunities for them where it's realistic for us. And then understanding that this is a process and it's going to take time, right? I can't expect them to know everything in a year or 12 months. Coming from like a QCC, QRS perspective, where we were trying to improve quality across the state, all of those things take time, right? Having teachers learn assessments, observations, developmentally appropriate practices, foundations and frameworks, and then environmental tools like Eckers, and then interactions with class. All of these things take time. So, giving them grace and just being there to support them along the way.
Thank you, Sandra. Christy, I know you had an additional sort of arm of the equity topic specific to workforce, but kind of outside of your district. And then I know you also had some examples of how your district has addressed that issue, as well as some of the others that Noemi and Sandra shared.
Yeah, so I think one area that we keep hearing in Oakland is the concern that the district's LEAs are going to take all the 4-year-olds from our community-based partners, our Head Start partners, our family, friend, and neighbors, our informal childcare providers. And so in Oakland, we have a collaborative called Oakland Starting Smart and Strong, and everybody that is serving families birth to 5 sits at this table. And when UTK was initially rolling out from the state, this question came up. And so for me, as the leader of the LEA in early learning, it was really important for me to hear these equity issues about possibly closing some of our home-based partners' doors, and how are they going to financially keep themselves afloat if they're going to be losing all these 4-year-olds? How are they going to continue to run their quality programs outside of the district? So, through the process that every school district needs to complete, the template, we engaged in a really robust, and are continuing to engage in a really robust collaborative approach on how we're going to serve children birth to 5, regardless of who the provider is. I always say in Oakland, I'm provider agnostic. A family should be able to choose what type of program they want to be a part of. If that's a family, friend, and neighbor till they come to us in kindergarten, that's fantastic. If they want to start with us at 3 years old in OUSD, wonderful, we're happy to have you. But I think the most important piece is that Oakland is a strong community with strong families and strong educators, and that we wanted to make sure that our CBOs and our small business owners were not going to lose their businesses because of UTK. So we're being really thoughtful. We're sharing data. We're being really transparent on where we're opening new programs. We're being really transparent on where we might have a vacant classroom that a CBO could lease to run their own program. We're applying for additional CSPP slots. Those are the state pre-K slots, so that we can subcontract with our CBO so they can serve more 3s. Because as you know, LEAs are the only ones that can apply for those new slots. But we feel really committed to our community in Oakland. And if they want to serve more 3s, we're happy to be that subcontractor to support them with this work. And I think another big piece is that what Sandra was saying is that most of our educators in early childhood have been doing this for a very long time. And we need to come up with a way to link our PK and TK teachers together. At times they can feel very isolated. Our TK teachers sometimes feel super isolated from the K-5 system. Our PK teachers feel really isolated from the TK-12 system. And so one thing we've been really trying to do is figure out how to have coaches that are TK PK coaches, and not just a PK coach and not just a TK coach, but thinking and learning and doing observations in all these classrooms to look at the natural continuum that's happening and to learn from one another. We've been uplifting our preschool teachers to do trainings, uplifting our TK teachers to do trainings. Yes, it's wonderful to hear from the experts outside, but the experts are in the classrooms. They already exist. So in OUSD, we try really hard not to bring in people, but to use and really tap into the knowledge of our own educators, because they know what they're doing and we need to celebrate them. So for me, the big equity issue that I keep hearing in the city of Oakland is, please, please, district, don't steal all of our 4s. And if you are, give us an idea on how we can serve more 3s. So that's one thing we're really working on.
Thank you, Christy. So Christy kind of led us into the next question, which is up on the screen, a specific example of a time you've addressed an equity issue in your role. And she really laid out a really nice approach that Oakland Unified is taking to partner with the community and address some of those, even some of just the questions and unknowns that have come up. To Christy again, or Noemi and Sandra, any other examples of addressing any of the equity issues that you've brought up, or others?
One of the things that we started doing in our district was, because we realized that a lot of 4-year-olds will be going into the district, was because we are still a part-day program, because we don't have the facilities to support a full-day program yet until we get there, is that working with all of those family, friend and neighbors, family, child care, our resource and referral, we are starting to have those conversations with our county office of ed of how we can collaborate with maybe a Head Start or a CSPP where they're dually enrolled, because they can be, it is parental choice, and they can go to TK. And then maybe we work with a fetch-in program where we can, send our TKers that way for the rest of the day if needed. And so we are trying to make sure that, that the children are still being served, and there's plenty, we're even working with private care if needed too. So that there's lots of options for parents, and that there are still plenty of kids that need to be served within our county.
Thank you, Sandra. Noemi, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to add really briefly that in Oxnard, through a collaborative work with our California education partners, we have established since last year, really getting ready for preschool to 3rd grade collaboration, an actual project, an actual work around successful alignment practices, adult and collaboration and learning spaces, looking at mathematical. We're focusing in the area of content area of math, but we're looking at the math practices and routines. We're looking at meaningful observations and supporting mathematics, and then we're looking at what assessments we're using and how we're using those learning tools. But the equity is that it is including preschool, not only our own district. We first started working with our district preschool and TK through 3rd grade colleagues. Our next plan and our next step is to bring in our community partners. So we work with 3 different agencies, community early learning agencies, who provide services on our district facilities. And these are classrooms that we have agreements that they are able to use to operate their own program. We have lots of communication between our programs, but not to the level that we really wanted to, and we have been wanting to. So this preschool to 3rd grade alignment is really going to be a nice opportunity for our district to begin that collaboration preschool to 3rd grade, and not only within our own district, but outside with our community partners.
I just wanted to add a couple more things about workforce and what I'm hearing of an equity issue from our community-based organizations. This is a direct quote. If the number of teachers are required is going to balloon, and if we don't recruit enough teachers, then the LEAs will draw the teachers from non-LEA programs because they pay more. This has been a big thing that has come up in Oakland, is that OUSD has a higher salary range than some of our community-based partners, and we get a lot of teachers that apply to OUSD. And we have made a serious commitment with our partners to make sure that we're in complete communication. We in no way want to drain the teacher pipeline to have everyone come to the school district if they're committed to their community-based organization. So trying to be really transparent with our community partners, making sure they're aware, if we're getting reference checks, that we're in full transparency with each other. We're in no way trying to collapse programs because of the workforce issue that is occurring. And so I think one big piece is that we have within our community-based organizations really amazing pipelines that already exist. So YMCA of East Bay and City of Oakland Head Start have their own training programs for parents that can get their units to become early childhood paras or instructional assistants. And so how can we collaborate with those partners that already happen already with our community colleges and our CBOs to make sure that we can send our own parents to those programs as well? So I think all I have to say is that if you're not in our community with your city that's serving fours, you must reach out to them, because the only way we can serve UTK or UPK effectively is if we do it well and we do it together. And so my first advice to anybody is, if you're not speaking with your local school districts or your local community-based partners or your local Head Start partner, get in relationship with them, because it's the only way this will happen effectively.
That's a great segue into our next and final question before we move to questions from the audience. So as an early implementer of TK, what advice do you have from the field? Noemi, let's go to you to start this one.
Thank you, Tara. I would say that in addition to the advice that Christy just said about reaching out to your early childhood education partners in the community, is really reach out to your county offices of education. We're very fortunate here in Ventura County to have a robust and very active local planning council. And within that planning council, there's lots of different committees and opportunities for our early education partners and LEAs to familiarize themselves with quality programming, with social emotional development strategies to help monitor and modify behavior. So all of these different resources. Our County Office of Education also provides services around inclusion and professional development and information about inclusion and how our classrooms and our teachers can help implement those strategies in the classroom. So I believe that our county offices of education are a wonderful resource in our community. And the second resource in the community that I would look at is, I believe it's still true that all of our counties have a First Five Commission. That's another resource that LEAs can reach out to, is their local First Five Commission that provides also great opportunities for not only for our early education, like 3 to 5 year olds, but they also have information and services and supports for birth to 5 year olds. So that's another great resource that we have here in our community, and I believe, as I said, these are active in all of our counties across the state.
Thanks, Noemi. Sandra, what advice do you have?
Just trust the process. Don't try to implement too much too fast for your teachers and the kids. Remember, they're 4, so trust your gut, trust your instinct. When you see that 4-year-old, don't force them to sit for that 20-minute circle time or that 15-minute circle time. It's not made for all of them. And same with your adult learners. As we are preparing this workforce, make sure that we're checking in with them, doing emotional check-ins, making sure we're not piling on too much at once. We kind of want them to be experts one chunk at a time, right? And just kind of trust the foundations. Like, there's value to kids playing with mud, in a mud kitchen. Not everything has to be in the classroom. Things can live in outdoor spaces. There's, I just think this morning I was playing with a kid, a little boy, and he was just on fire with number recognition. So I was mixing up tiles and I said, okay, what if I put this number and this number together? What does it make? And he says, oh, 96, 52. And I said, wow, you're really smart. How did you get so smart? And he goes, I don't know. I just woke up and one day my brain just started working. And it was really cute because he was like 4. And, and that's the thing, is that their brains will naturally process. Remember that this is rapid time for brain development, the 0 to 5. So TK is really exciting for us as a district because we know that this is where we get to make that impact and make a difference. But learning goes on when people are enjoying the process, right? So the kids have to enjoy it and adults have to enjoy it. What we don't want is we don't want it to be like, womp, 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 TK's coming. You know, I want my teachers to realize that they are brain developers, not, you know, babysitters, and they have an impact in this really young grade. And so just empower the kids and the teachers.
Thank you, Sandra. Christy, before we go to questions from the panelists, just do you have any, I know you already shared some really helpful advice. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I do actually. I would say if I could do it all over again, I would apply for as many grants as humanly possible to have coaches from the very beginning. And what I would do is I would apply for that money. I would then recruit my best TK teachers and try to convince them to apply for these coaching positions, and my best PK teachers and try to convince them to apply for these positions. Because at the end of the day, they are the ones currently now that are making the most impact and movement in our programs is when we have high quality coaching that's tied to PD. We can do a PD, but if someone doesn't come into your room and follow up with you about it, you're not going to implement it. You're not going to maybe even remember it. So it would be apply for money, use that money for high quality PD, and have those PD implementers go into the classroom and support and coach and really be a sounding board and support system for our early learning educators. That is my biggest advice, is that we in central office positions, yes, we love kids, but at the end of the day, our coaches make the biggest impact, truly. Another thing I would say is that if you haven't gone into an early learning classroom, make time to do so. If you're a K-12 educator or a fifth grade teacher or a high school principal, I think it's really important to see what's happening in our 3, 4, and 5-year-old classrooms. You have a little bit more credibility when you know what you're talking about because you've seen it. And so there's nothing better that fills my cup than being in a classroom. And so I would really encourage everybody to, if you're not in early learning, become best friends with the early learning director, coordinator, principal of your district, and really figure out how to create strong partnerships, because you never know, you might have a 3-year-old that wants to go into the district program. And so to be able to speak about it, to be able to promote it is really important.
Great, thank you, Christy. Rebecca, I think we're ready for questions from the field.
Okay, well, I have a lot of questions for you. We'll see how many we get to. I've picked out a few themes that I've heard, and one of them is something that all of you have commented on. It's about curriculum and professional development for teachers. There are audience members who are interested in hearing about how you're choosing and establishing a curriculum, given that there is not a state adopted curriculum. Also, how you identify high quality professional learning opportunities, and also if you have any specific providers in addition to the coaching model that was already discussed.
I can start about the curriculum piece. We're doing that right now with TK. We are working with a group of TK teachers, administrators, anyone that's associated with TK could apply to be a part of this committee. Really, we took any volunteer. And we presented them with some of the 3 kind of top curriculums out there that they're really more geared towards preschool. There isn't a specific TK curriculum. So we had to kind of search and really do our research on some different options. And they were presented these different things. They came and looked at the materials. We had educators who were implementing these curriculums do a PD for them to answer any questions. And then they came to an agreement and made a vote on what curriculum they wanted to select. So again, I would say never select a curriculum in isolation, and make sure that your educators are fully participating in the process, because they're going to be the ones implementing it. And that's my advice. You know, the state has said that they might be looking at creating a curriculum and possibly assessment, but I think they're still in the kind of the beginning stages of that, maybe putting a committee together. But for now, that's the process that we're taking.
For us, we do have a curriculum in place already that we have been using in our TK programs. And now our next steps is to make sure that our curriculum is aligned and our practices are aligned between the preschool foundations and frameworks and our kindergarten core standards. I do understand that CDE is taking a look at the preschool standards and frameworks and adopting updating them to include a transitional kindergarten. So we will be expecting those soon. I'm not sure exactly when they will be done, but I believe that they're looking at it now. In the meantime, we will continue to provide professional development around the getting to know those preschool frameworks and foundations, and then aligning our practices across the board. The types of professional development that we offer during the school year are really in tune to what we believe is needed. We've been able to identify as a need in our district. So for example, this next year, because we're moving forward with our implementing the frameworks and the learning foundations, we're going to be doing an extensive professional development around that area. We're also going to be using the developmental, the DRDP, Desired Results Developmental Profile, the kindergarten version for our TK, which is new to our TK program. And we're going to be rolling out professional development around that. We're very fortunate that our county office of education has staff who has been certified in both of those areas. And so we're going to be working with our county office of education to be able to provide that support for our district, not only our district, but the districts here in our county.
And for us, we are still looking at, like I said, our programs are using 2 different curriculums right now. TK is using one, and then preschool is using one. But what I want my teachers to really realize is they need to know those foundations and frameworks, because the curriculum is just a guide, but they really need to be in tune to the children on their, perspectives from the kids, and figuring out how can they implement all the foundations and frameworks in any situation, really. And so getting to know, like Noemi said, those DRDP measures really well, so that we can see where the children are developmentally across the continuum, because I can have a curriculum and maybe 5 kids in my class aren't even ready to be there, and so they need to be really in tune to the kids and figure out what is appropriate for that age group.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, we use Big Day for pre-K and preschool by Scholastic for a while, and then that sunsetted, and then our preschool teachers just recently selected creative curriculum last year. And then our TK teachers are in the process of submitting their recommendation to the board. So those were the 2 that we have used in early learning so far. And I know Head Start also uses creative curriculum.
In our district, for preschool, we use Opening the World of Learning, known as OWL, OWL. And in kindergarten, we use a different curriculum, and that's World of Wonder. And then Writing Without Tears. And then we supplement it with others. So we're also actively looking for, going to be researching for a new curriculum as well that encompasses all content and content areas.
Yeah, and we are using Curiosity Corner for our preschool and World of Wonders for TK. And there's parts of the curriculum that I love and other parts that I would toss, to be quite honest. And so as you know, and I always tell my teachers, if that part of the curriculum works, let's keep it. And right now, we're like, one of my teachers was like, I love Zoophonics. Fine, we'll order Zoophonics. That will just be an add-on, no problem. But, we are looking into getting into creative curriculum because, it's a little more open. But, and around PD wise, we are using, I guess I would sit back and just say, where are the supports that teachers need coming into a new classroom? And so everything always starts off with relationships. So we always have a very heavy emphasis on relationships for PD. But just figuring out what tools we want them to learn first. And so for us, behavior management was a big one. Trauma is going to be another big one coming into this next year, just because of everything that's gone on through the pandemic. And environment, right? How to set up environment. And so, because I've seen that look very different across our TK and pre-K classrooms. And so figuring out what's the best balance for that, because whether it's a TK curriculum or a pre-K curriculum, it doesn't matter. By 2025, 2026, they're all going to be kind of around that same age group. My pre-K classrooms might be a little bit younger, but the TK pre-K label is just a label for me, right? I still want to do what's best for the child at that age.
Thank you so much. I want to move us to a different topic. I have a feeling we could spend all of our time on the issue of curriculum, but let's, for the sake of this first introductory session, move on. I think that many of us were really struck by your specific descriptions of what an effective pre-K/TK classroom looks like. And for those of you who are wondering why we are using these terms interchangeably, let me just make a public service announcement that TK is a part of the universal pre-K policy, but there are many other components. So that's why you hear us using both languages. They represent the same groups of students in terms of age. And so some of the questions that have come in from the chat are related to better understanding how you see effective classrooms address issues of inclusion related to students with IEPs and also students with adverse childhood experiences, as you were just beginning to describe, Sandra. So is there someone who could take us on a little journey into what you would look for in a TK classroom that is addressing those issues effectively for kids? I want to just say before I turn it over to you that Noemi's description that an effective TK's teacher's work is to manipulate the environment to support learning really strikes me as a very distinct approach to the developmental process. And so any window you can give for us into the role of the teacher or what you see in the classroom, how the relationships are with students to help us better understand what that looks like from your perspective is especially welcome.
I know Christy and Noemi and Sandra all have a lot to share about this. Christy, would you like to start? I think, especially because you have such experience with special education.
Yeah, sure, of course. So I just want to say that inclusion is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and all kids have the right to access their typically developing peers. But what I would say is that you really have to build strong supports for the educators that are working with children with IEPs. Because just to place a child with an IEP into a classroom that isn't ready, not only is it not fair to the child, but it's not fair to the family. And so for us, we applied for the EAP grant that came through the state of California and have been using those funds to really provide strong professional development into our general ed preschool classrooms. Our hope is to, of course, expand this into TK. I can talk about TK inclusion a little bit. It's a little different in TK. But in preschool, we are working with a behaviorist, working with speech therapist, an OT, a preschool special education teacher, that all push into the classroom, do observations, provide support, do child study teams, really this whole village collaborative model that our teachers, if they are saying, you know, I'm really struggling with this, or I don't know how to serve this child well, that we don't ignore these, you know, requests, but we push in and provide the support. Just today, a group of us went and supported all of the preschool classrooms at one site so the entire team could meet about their inclusion program, because our preschool teachers don't get minimum days. And so to have that collaboration time for inclusion and PD is really, really important. How it looks in TK is that we have TK special day classrooms, we have TK inclusion as well, but that's looking like the children are more in a resource type model. So they're getting pulled out for services, spend a majority of their day in their TK classroom. Now, if a child is needing extra support, we still do the same process through a COS team or an SST, have a meeting with the family, figure out developmentally what's going on, maybe do an ASQ with the family, really ask those developmentally appropriate questions. But I think the biggest piece is that you have to really support your teaching teams that are implementing inclusion. Just because everybody says inclusion is great doesn't mean they have all of the skills to do it well or the confidence to do it well. And so a big lesson for us is really working with people who really want to implement inclusion in the beginning and then from there. There was a second question. Oh, another big piece is that we, so for students who are having some regulation concerns or looking at different types of behavior, we really work closely with our Starting Smart and Strong partners with 10 promising practices, specifically for Black boys in our preschool and TK classrooms to look at how we can support children. We use something called the EDI. We do that every 3 years. That really looks at the social emotional development. There's multiple domains to think about how kids are showing up to kindergarten. And then we use that data to figure out how we can do some trauma-informed practices. We really prefer the word resiliency as opposed to trauma in Oakland. The word trauma is actually very triggering for a lot of people in our community. And so really thinking about how to develop resiliency. And we focus on the educator. Because as educators, we need to kind of come into our own place of resiliency, figure out what we're bringing in, what triggers we have, and how that's triggering our children. So we do a lot of self-work, internal work to figure out what we're bringing and what are some things that we can do to change our practices so that we're not unintentionally triggering children who are already having
Absolutely. So like in Weaver, we are really trying to just train all the teachers, because what we're realizing is that has their own implicit bias. What does inclusion even mean? Those definitions are different across the state as we talk to people, right? What does a classroom with inclusion even look like? Everyone's describing it differently. So having lots of meetings just so that we're all on the same page, and then supporting the teachers with lots of PD and coaching, because what we've found is that they're nervous, right? They're nervous about this process, and just making sure that we're holding their hand along the way and saying we're here to support you as we support the child, because we're always going to do what's best for the child. And so, as we look at our own values and perceptions and beliefs, and then figure out how is that translating into the classroom and our teaching styles, our coaching styles, all of those things we think about when we support inclusion. And then whatever the child needs, we try to provide. So if it's a one-on-one aid, if it's support, we really just are open to lots of ideas. It's trial and error with kids. You don't know what's really going to work until you're in it. And so just making sure that we are just looking at all options and figuring out what's best for the child.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the next question, if that's okay, because we have so many questions from our audience. The third question is about community colleges and institutes of higher education. You've described several partners. A lot of them are first five, county-based, regionally based, locally based, and there are several people in the audience who are interested in hearing about how you see community colleges and also four-year colleges being partners in the implementation of this policy.
So,
go ahead, Sandra, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so for us in Merced, we just, we have a partnership with our UC where they can take the classes for units that just started last year. And then we also work closely with CDTC, the Child Development Training Consortium, where anyone that is working in an early ed program can apply for an educational grant where they will fully pay for those units as long as they pass the class, along with books and tuition and the permits sometimes. And so just making sure that, and that works for any community college in California. And so just making sure that as I'm coaching teachers, that they know they have lots of options and avenues.
Sandra, say the name of the community college program one more time. I have a feeling people are taking copious notes.
It is the Child Development Training Consortium, and so they are linked to all of the community colleges. And I can drop the website into the chat for you, Rebecca, and you can get it out to everybody.
Thank you.
For us in Oxnard, we currently hold a grant opportunity with our local Channel Islands University. But in the past, it was geared towards increasing bilingual and special education teachers. And this round of funding that was just released included TK. So we're really looking forward to addressing some of our workforce preparedness with the local community college, and the university. In addition to that, as a district, we are participating in a collaborative, a countywide collaborative led by our County Office of Education, and they will be writing for the early childhood education grant opportunities that are going to be released soon, I hope. We have issued a letter of intent, and then I believe that the RFA is going to be released soon. So we're really looking forward to collaborate and building a strong collaborative around that early childhood education credential and opportunities for our workforce.
Thank you. I'm going to end with this last question, which is there were a lot of responses and positive responses to each of the ways that you described partnerships with other providers and engaging with community-based preschools, and also thinking about a dual enrollment. There were many comments about how exciting that was to see the level of collaboration. I think that what folks are looking for is figuring out how to start that process. As early implementers, you've been doing this work. You have formalized councils, you have established relationships. Put yourself in the shoes of someone in this webinar who is just starting on this journey. They recognize the need. How do they start? What advice do you have for how to start working with and collaborating with other partners?
I can tell you how I actually started, because I had no idea. So the first thing that I did was I contacted First Five of Alameda County, and I asked them if there was any provider consortium in Oakland that has a list of every single early learning provider, birth through 5, in the city of Oakland. And they directed me towards an organization called Bananas, our resource and referral system here in Oakland. And so I connected with Bananas. I got a list of every single provider, birth through 5. I put them on a map, and I started emailing and calling them. And I said, I really want to get to know what type of program you're doing and how we can collaborate, because at the time the district was not a partner with our CBOs. And I really, really wanted to change that narrative. I wanted to connect with other like-minded people like me who really wanted to be a part of early learning. And so I literally just researched it. And Bananas was a huge resource for me. They had a list of everybody. Anyone that was offering a CSPP contract, anyone that was offering Head Start or early Head Start services. They gave me a list of all the private preschools in the area, and I just started reaching out. Then around in 2014, 2015, Oakland Starting Smart and Strong was established through the generous donations of the Packard Foundation, which brought all of us early learning providers to one table. So I would say that if you can apply for some grant money to form your own collaborative, an early learning collaborative, the impact you can make will be amazing. Making sure that you include parents in that collaborative as well. We have 2 wonderful organizations that sit on the collaborative, Parent Voices and Plan, and they're really in tune to the community. They're parents themselves, they're in the school district, they're in the community-based organizations. If you don't have parent voices in these tables and these conversations, there's no point in meeting, in my opinion. You really need to hear from families what they need. And you really need to hear from our business owners, our small business owners, our family, friend, and neighbor, our informal care providers, and our CBOs to hear what's going on in their situations as well.
Another resource in the community is that every single county, as I understand, has a local resource and referral agency. And this particular agency is responsible for providing information about all the different opportunities that are out there for childcare, preschool, family friendly, licensed, unlicensed, the whole gamut of services for families. There's at least one organization in each county that has that responsibility. In our county, it is one of our early learning partners, and so they are always a wealth of information, not only about the early learning opportunities in our county, but also about data. They've been able to provide me data about need in the community for our own writing purposes, for writing the plan. So I encourage you to reach out to them, put on your tennis shoes and start walking the community, getting to know all of those early learning partners. They are always, and they have always been very, very welcoming and welcoming to having LEAs work with them. They serve our families. They serve the families right now, not only early learning families, but our preschool through 8th grade, high school students and families. So it behooves us to really get to know the early learning and family-friendly resources and partners that we have out there. But nothing beats putting on a pair of tennis shoes and walking and knocking on doors or calling them on the phone. They are always, in my experience, they've always been very, very welcoming.
And I think for us, just think outside the box, get to know people, build those relationships throughout the community. Like we've even thought about, reaching out to city parks and rec and having them do after school programs that are centered around sports or the Boys and Girls Club. There's just so many options and opportunities. As much as we don't know what we're doing yet, neither do the other people. We're painting this canvas together, right? We are building it together, and that's okay. Just understanding that there's so many possibilities for us because there aren't a lot of barriers in this too, right? And so can the Boys and Girls Club do something where we do something meaningful for the district, and really just thinking outside of that box. Today we had our superintendent, he came in and he taught the preschoolers how to golf. And we just said, hey, they also have this program called First Tee. Is that something that we can provide for the kids during ELOP? You know what I mean? And so, because now I have the poorest kids in our community golfing, and they would never have a chance to do that. And so really just thinking outside of the box for us and just knowing that, we're all inputting in this process together and everything is a value,
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Tara for a few closing comments.
Sure. So I just want to thank Christy, Noemi, and Sandra for being here today and sharing your insight, your expertise, just so much. I was writing notes. So to summarize is a little bit difficult, but I think what's really important for folks to hear and realize is that everything that our panelists today shared comes from, this experience they have. All of them have been in districts that have been implementing TK really fully from the very beginning and really taken the initiative to learn and reach out and form partnerships and build a comprehensive system where TK really is part of this universal pre-K system. But what I heard a lot was that there's also this opportunity right now to kind of reset. So there's a lot of you that are kind of starting right now, and even those who've been experienced in doing this work are taking an opportunity to kind of look with fresh eyes. There's a lot of new resources coming out from CDE, including through county offices of education, that help clarify what TK is and what it can be and how to implement it. That wasn't really available in our implementation of TK so far. So again, just sort of this opportunity to take a really fresh start and to really put the time and effort into planning to do things well and in a high quality way. The key sort of things that I heard from our panelists in their experiences and some of their advice and all of the questions they heard really are about partnerships, resources, support, and process, right? So much around all of the different partnerships within the district and outside of the district, community partners, partnering with families, support to the workforce through professional development, coaching, resources, and then, you know, the different suggestions around making sure that you're taking advantage of the different resources. There are grants, there are a lot of resources that are coming from CDE in a more systematic way than I've ever seen before. And so, yeah, I think what I would just wrap up with is each of our panelists, even though they share kind of a similar sort of level of expertise, they all have really different experiences, and their districts are unique and distinct from each other, and they're all implementing TK in a unique way that meets their district needs, their community needs, and the needs of their students, families, and their workforce.
Thank you. I want to add a few final comments as someone who spent most of my career in K-12 education before coming to higher education. I was listening from the perspective of a K-12 professional. And what I heard today was that we really need to think about how the issue of individualized education and developmentally appropriate education being tied to individualized education is realized in effective pre-K classrooms. And then I would extend that to how that approach, the idea of the teacher preparing the environment for successful learning, is translated across the P3 spectrum. We didn't get to really dive into that very deeply today, but what the implications of those practices may be for grade 1, for grade 2, and even grade 3 in the future. And so that was really powerful for me as somebody coming from the K-12 perspective. The other piece that really struck me about the conversation was how each of these leaders has decentered their institution as K-12 and really taken it upon themselves to reach out and be in a horizontal position with their community partners, to really recognize that we're the ones coming to the table late, and to recognize the expertise in the field. And I really was struck and appreciate that very much, because K-12 is already so complicated. It's easy to just look inwardly and not really think about the larger context in which this work is being done. So thank you so much to all of our panelists, some of whom are already presenting in board meetings in the next few minutes because the work continues. And I want to ask our participants to please give us some feedback about this webinar. We're interested in hearing if other webinars of this type would be useful to you, and we absolutely seek your input in our future planning. Also, we want to encourage you to consider joining the community of practice that I described earlier. There were some questions posed in the chat that I think will be taken up in the community of practice, more around coordination or early design. And so I really encourage those folks with those types of questions to join the community of practice as a way to begin collectively thinking about and problem solving some of the structural and coordination challenges at play. Finally, I want to share, a few resources from the California Department of Education in case you're unaware of them. The California Department of Education is making a great effort to try to coordinate its resources, and these two websites are very important resources for that. I suggest you look there weekly at any additional updates that might be coming in, and also join their mailing list so that you receive all of the information that they are coordinating for the state. Thank you again to Dial EE, to Tara Ryan, and all of our panelists today. This has been a tremendous session, and we truly appreciate your time during this very busy season. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you, everybody.